People in Washington are talking about Iran as another just geopolitical rival, another regime that we could possibly negotiate, another government, seeking influence. But the regime in Tehran is not just political. The regime in Iran is built on a theological revolution. The clerics that took over in 1979, they didn't just overthrow a government. They built a system designed to export their ideology all across the globe. And what is that ideology produced? Let me talk to you about the actual record in Iran. In Iran, women can be beaten in the street by the morality police for showing too much hair. Young girls have been dragged into vans in prison and tortured. We saw it a few years ago when the woman who was arrested for not wearing her hijab properly was killed in prison. How about the 9-year-olds that they are insisting are cool to marry now a 50-year-old guy? When there's protests in the streets, thousands are arrested. Thousands are killed. Some protesters are executed publicly. Young men have been hung from cranes. Children are imprisoned. Girls assaulted in prison. You have homosexuals that are thrown off roofs or beheaded in the public square. And it's all being done in the name of God. And that same regime has spent decades exporting the violence and this ideology all across the world. They fund Hezbollah in Lebanon. But Hezbollah was in Venezuela. They arm Hamas. They finance militias in Iraq and Syria. They support terror cells across continents. The revolution was never meant to stay in Iran because it is a spiritual battle for them. It is religious. They believe they're welcoming the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, which this one, the 12th Imam, actually comes back after climbing out of a well, and he rules the world and washes the world in blood. They believe that this is the final battle, and they say all of this stuff openly. But here's the part that should concern everybody. Because, I don't know how many people are here that have been influenced inside our own country, have been influenced by this. I don't know. Do you know? We know there are sleeper networks that apparently have been activated, but we don't know. We know extremist recruitment exists, but we don't know the scope. But let me bring you here to home, here in New York. We were just reminded how real that threat is just over the weekend. 2 Afghan immigrants, young men, whose family came to this country to escape the war years ago, own, I think, a convenience store, live in a nice house. They decided their faith had been insulted, so they built a bomb. It's called the bomb of Satan, okay? It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't, it was a crude device. Thank God it didn't go off, but it was packed with screws and bolts. According to the FBI, if that thing would have worked, it would have caused more damage in that crowd than the Boston Marathon bombing. Let that sink in for a minute. Hundreds of innocent people on the street, men, women, children, torn apart by metal shrapnel. And why did they do it? In the name of their God. Let me stop here for a second and just say something really clear. No God commands you to murder innocent people walking down the street. No God orders you to do that. Satan does, God does not. That's not faith. That is evil wearing the mask of faith. But here's the really uncomfortable part about all of this. This spiritual blindness, we see it in radical movements overseas, but it's here in the West in a different form. Evil doesn't come, wearing a Nazi uniform. Rarely does it. It creeps in quietly. It normalizes things. It confuses moral ideas through ideology. And if you look at the patterns of history, it's there over and over again. And what was there in history is here now. Did you know that before Nazi Germany descended into full horror show, something else was happening in the Weimar Republic? The moral framework of the society was completely collapsing. Did you know the first modern transgendered surgeries were performed in Berlin in the 1920s at the Institute for Sexual Science? Did you know that the first book burnings were trying to get those books out of the schools? Radical gender theory was all over the Weimar Republic. At the same time, another idea was also spreading in Weimar Germany called euthanasia, compassion killing. The idea was the elderly, the disabled, the mentally ill, the people who were burdens to society and really had no quality of life were eliminated for the greater good. And first, it was framed as mercy. It was compassion. It was medical progress. But by the time the Nazis took full control, those ideas became the foundation for the death camps. You know, history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does rhyme. And today, we're seeing all of the rhymes. We're seeing them here. Countries are expanding assisted suicide programs. Do you know that we have 18 states here in the U.S. trying to pass medical death bills this year? Canada is offering MAID, not just to the terminally ill now, but to people and young adults suffering from depression. What? Do you know that they're about to hit 100,000 people? That's more people died from assisted suicide in Canada than in all of World War II. Does that seem like it's rational or right? You know, debates about whether children can alter their bodies before they're old enough to drive a car don't seem to be real debates. They wouldn't be in a moral and sane society. But we've completely lost our compass. And here's the part that nobody wants to say out loud, because it cuts across all political tribes. Socialism, which, by the way, socialism includes Nazis, known as the National Socialists, Marxism, political Islam. These ideologies seem different on the surface, different language, different slogans, but they're not. Historically, they produce the same outcomes, and historically, they work together for control and suppression and violence and death. It's a death cult. Let me go back to Iran. 1979, Marxist groups helped fuel the revolution against the Shah of Iran. They marched alongside the clerics. The Marxists were the ones that organized the youth and the universities. Sound familiar? And they believed they were building partners in a new future. And the clerics got all of the people that were going into the mosques. And they said, oh, yeah, Marxists, we are one with you. But when the 12 clerics took power, they imprisoned them. They tortured the Marxists. They executed them by the thousands. Because revolutionary movements always eat their allies once they gain power. You know, in the name of God. And that always happens. Which brings us to today in America. We're spiritually blind. The left constantly is pointing to Nazis on the right, and some of those warnings seem to become more and more legitimate, because extremism exists because people are going spiritually blind. But here's what the left refuses to acknowledge. At the same time they're warning about fascism and Nazis, they're embracing, what's the guy's name who is a Nazi that's running for the Democrat Congress, and they're embracing him. And they're embracing ideologies that historically produce the same brutality. So you got people on the right ignoring the warnings entirely because they're focused on the wrong enemy. And you have it on the left as well. So both sides looking in the wrong direction. Why? Because they're spiritually blind. And meanwhile, evil is doing what it always does. It always captures minds. Evil doesn't begin with violence. It begins with deception, convincing people that cruelty is compassion. You don't have a vaccine, no hospital care for you. That's compassionate. That's cruelty. Convincing people that murder is righteousness. Luigi Mangione, does that sound familiar? or convincing people that chaos is justice, BLM, burning cities down to the ground. All of these things, this is evil. And once enough people believe those things, once people are believing these lies, the atrocities follow. They always do. Which brings me back to the main point most people miss. This is not a political battle. I was thinking about the Iran war yesterday and what I said to you yesterday, and I feel I failed to really make the real point. I was talking to you about missiles and geopolitical stuff. We're in a spiritual battle, and you cannot defeat evil if you refuse to recognize it. You can't defend our civilization if you abandon the moral foundation that built it. We can't protect our nation if we're spiritually asleep. The Bible tells us put on the full armor of God. You're not fighting flesh and bone. Well, what is the full armor of God? Truth, righteousness, faith, discernment, the gospel of peace, forgiveness, weapons and armies. That's what everybody's talking about today. But the real truth is civilization cannot be saved if it has lost its soul. And history proves it time and time again. So the question is not just about Iran or terrorism or politics. The real question is this: are you awake? Can you even see the spiritual battle that is unfolding right now? Can you notice that people everywhere, the majority, are pretending, or maybe they're not pretending, they really believe that these are just political disagreements? If we refuse to see it, if we refuse to stand up and say, guys, that's not what this is about, then we're continuing to normalize evil. If we remain spiritually numb, then the tragedies that we all fear are not going to just happen overseas. They're going to happen here. And by then, it'll be too late to stop them. So my first message to you today is, wake up. Wake your friends up.